Be quiet. The entire Grand Hall froze when the Omega spoke those two words to the most feared Alpha King in the realm. For a moment no one moved. No one breathed. Because everyone in Blackthorn Kingdom knew one simple truth. Nobody told King Adrian Blackwood what to do. The annual gathering of the Pax was supposed to be a night of respect, tradition, and unity. Leaders from across the werewolf territories had traveled hundreds of miles to stand before the Alpha King, hoping to earn his approval and strengthen their alliances. The Grand Hall of Blackthorn Castle shined beneath hundreds of golden lights, with ancient banners hanging from the stone walls and the quiet whispers of powerful families filling the air. Then Adrian entered. The room instantly changed. The Alpha King carried the kind of presence that made people remember their place. He was respected across the kingdom for his wisdom, his confidence, and his ability to lead during difficult times. But there was another thing people knew about him. Adrian Blackwood was impossible to challenge. His words were always followed. His decisions were rarely questioned. That was why everyone was shocked when Emily Carter, a young Omega from the small Frostvale pack, stepped forward. Emily had never belonged among the powerful. She was used to standing at the edge of crowded rooms, listening more than speaking. Many people saw her as ordinary because she did not come from a famous family or carry an impressive title. But Emily had something most people had forgotten. She had courage. The moment began when the Alpha King addressed the gathering. His voice was calm but commanding as he spoke about loyalty, responsibility, and the future of the Pax. Everyone listened carefully. Everyone except Emily. She noticed something others ignored. A young member of a smaller pack was struggling to speak, afraid that nobody important would listen. Emily saw the hesitation in their eyes because she knew that feeling well. She knew what it felt like to be invisible. Before she realized what she was doing, Emily stepped forward. The hall became silent. Adrian looked toward her with surprise. "You have something to say?" he asked. Many expected Emily to lower her head. They expected fear. Instead, she looked at the Alpha King calmly. "Yes," she answered. Adrian waited. "Be quiet." The words fell into the room like a sudden spark. Everyone looked at her as if they could not believe what they had heard. But Emily was not trying to insult him. She was asking him to listen. For the first time in years, someone had interrupted the Alpha King not because they wanted power, but because they wanted someone else to be heard. Adrian stared at her, and then something unexpected happened. He laughed. Not because he was angry, not because he wanted to embarrass her. He laughed because he had never met anyone who looked at him without fear. "Make me," he replied with a quiet smile. The entire hall was stunned. But Emily noticed something behind his confident expression. She saw curiosity. She saw a man who was used to being obeyed but rarely understood. That moment became the beginning of something neither of them expected. The Omega who everyone overlooked had captured the attention of the one person nobody dared challenge. And the Alpha King had just discovered that the quietest voice in the room might be the one he needed to hear the most. The moment Emily Carter spoke to the Alpha King in front of the entire gathering became the only thing anyone in Blackthorn Kingdom could talk about. By the following morning, whispers traveled through the castle halls faster than the morning wind. An Omega had challenged King Adrian Blackwood. An Omega had stood before the most powerful leader in the realm and refused to be intimidated. But what surprised everyone even more was the Alpha King's reaction. He had not punished her. He had not dismissed her. Instead, he had laughed. For years, Adrian had surrounded himself with people who carefully chose every word around him. Advisors measured their sentences. Leaders waited for permission before speaking. Even those closest to him often avoided sharing honest opinions because they feared disappointing him. But Emily was different. She did not speak because she wanted attention. She spoke because she believed someone needed to listen. The next morning, Adrian requested a private conversation with her. When the message reached Emily, she expected trouble. She knew many people believed she had crossed a line. She knew an Omega from a small pack was not supposed to challenge an Alpha King during a formal gathering. Yet when she entered the quiet garden behind the castle, she found Adrian standing there calmly, looking over the kingdom below. "Do you always tell powerful people to be quiet?" he asked. Emily paused, unsure if he was teasing or testing her. "Only when they are not listening," she answered. For a moment Adrian said nothing. Then he smiled slightly. Most people would have apologized immediately. Most people would have tried to explain themselves. Emily simply answered honestly. That honesty fascinated him. You were not trying to disrespect me, Adrian said. Emily shook her head. No. I was trying to remind you that everyone deserves to be heard. Those words stayed with him. Adrian had spent years carrying the responsibility of an entire kingdom. He believed he understood what his people needed because he had been trained to lead from a young age. But Emily showed him something different. Sometimes the people with the least power were the ones who noticed the things others ignored. While Adrian continued speaking with Emily, the royal court began questioning his interest in her. They could not understand why the Alpha King would spend time with an Omega who had no recognized status. Some believed she was too ordinary to stand beside someone like him. Others believed her confidence was simply a temporary mistake. Emily heard the whispers, but she did not let them change who she was. She had spent years being judged by people who never truly knew her. She refused to allow new opinions to control her now. Adrian noticed that strength. He had met many people who wanted to stand near his power, but Emily was the first person who seemed completely unaffected by it. She treated him like a person before a title. That was something he had not experienced in a very long time. Later that day, Adrian invited Emily to walk through the castle grounds. He wanted to understand the Omega who had challenged him. He asked about her life in Frostvale Pack, her dreams, and the experiences that shaped her. Emily answered honestly, explaining that she never wanted influence or recognition. She only wanted people to stop deciding someone's value before knowing their heart. As the sun set over Blackthorn Kingdom, Adrian realized something unexpected. The Omega everyone overlooked was not weak. She was not insignificant. She carried a quiet confidence that came from knowing exactly who she was. And for the first time in years, the Alpha King found himself looking forward to hearing a voice that did not always agree with him. The days after Emily Carter's unexpected conversation with the Alpha King brought a strange change to Blackthorn Kingdom. Nothing official had been announced, yet everyone could feel that something was different. The castle that once moved according to strict traditions now carried a new sense of curiosity. People wanted to understand the Omega who had done what no one else dared to do. They wanted to know why King Adrian Blackwood listened to her. But Emily herself did not see what she had done as something extraordinary. She simply believed that respect should exist between every person, regardless of rank or title. That belief was something she had carried with her long before she ever stepped into the royal castle. Growing up in Frostvale Pack, Emily learned early that being quiet did not mean being powerless. She watched how some voices were ignored simply because they came from people without influence. She knew what it felt like to stand in a room and wonder if anyone truly noticed her. That was why she could not stay silent when she saw someone else experiencing the same thing. Adrian began noticing these small moments. He watched Emily speak with servants, listen to younger members of the pack, and thank people who others often overlooked. She treated everyone with the same kindness, whether they had a powerful family name or carried no title at all. To Emily, respect was not something earned through status. It was something everyone deserved. One afternoon, Adrian invited her to join him during a visit outside the castle walls. He wanted to show her the heart of Blackthorn Kingdom beyond the royal halls. As they traveled through the nearby villages, Emily saw the people who depended on the decisions made inside the castle. She listened to their concerns and asked questions that many leaders had forgotten to ask. Adrian quietly observed her. He had expected her to be nervous around the people of the kingdom, but instead she made them feel comfortable. You speak to everyone the same way, Adrian said as they walked through the village square. Emily looked at him. Should I speak differently because someone has a title? The question caught him off guard. It was simple, but it carried a truth he had never considered. Adrian had spent his entire life surrounded by hierarchy. He had been taught that every person had a place. But Emily reminded him that a person's position did not determine their importance. As their connection grew, the royal court became more uncertain. Some advisors believed Adrian was allowing personal feelings to influence his decisions. They questioned why an Omega from Frostvale Pack had become someone the Alpha King trusted. Emily heard those concerns but remained calm. She had no desire to fight for a place beside Adrian. She did not want power. She only wanted to be honest. That honesty was exactly what made Adrian respect her even more. One evening, while standing beneath the lights of the castle courtyard, Adrian asked Emily a question he rarely asked anyone. "Do you ever wish people saw you differently?" Emily thought for a moment before answering. "I used to. But then I realized I cannot control what people choose to see. I can only control who I choose to be." Adrian remained silent. Those words stayed with him long after their conversation ended. The Alpha King had spent years searching for loyalty, strength, and wisdom among the most powerful figures in the realm. Yet the person who offered him the greatest truth was the Omega everyone else had ignored. And as Adrian continued learning more about Emily, he began to wonder if fate had brought her to Blackthorn Kingdom for a reason neither of them understood yet. The quiet connection between Emily Carter and King Adrian Blackwood continued to grow, but neither of them realized how much their simple conversations were changing the balance inside Blackthorn Kingdom. To everyone else, the Alpha King was a symbol of authority. He was the ruler who carried the responsibility of countless packs, and the leader whose decisions shaped the future of the realm. But Emily saw something others rarely noticed. She saw the person behind the crown. She saw the man who carried the expectations of an entire kingdom, while rarely allowing himself to be understood. Adrian had always believed that showing uncertainty was a weakness. From a young age, he was taught that an Alpha King had to remain composed, confident, and unshaken. But Emily never asked him to be perfect. She never expected him to have every answer. She simply listened when he spoke, and that made something inside him begin to change. Meanwhile, Emily started discovering more about Blackthorn Kingdom. She learned about the traditions that shaped the werewolf society, the responsibilities of the royal family, and the challenges Adrian faced every day. She began to understand that his confidence was not just pride. It was also a responsibility he carried alone. One evening, the kingdom held a formal celebration honoring the leaders who had traveled from different territories. Emily attended as Adrian's guest, though she felt uncomfortable being surrounded by people who were used to royal customs. She knew many still questioned why an Omega from Frostvale Pack was receiving such attention. As she entered the grand hall, she noticed the familiar feeling of being judged before being known. But this time something was different. She was no longer the same person who stood quietly at the edge of every room. She had learned that her voice mattered. During the celebration, a discussion began about the future of smaller packs. Several leaders suggested that decisions should continue being made only by those with the highest status. Emily listened carefully before speaking. A kingdom cannot grow if it only listens to the people already sitting at the highest table. The room became quiet. Adrian looked at her with a small smile because he recognized the courage behind those words. Emily was not challenging authority for attention. She was challenging the idea that only certain people deserved to be heard. After the gathering, Adrian walked with her through the palace gardens. The evening air was calm, and for a moment, the weight of leadership seemed distant. "You always say what everyone else is thinking," Adrian said. Emily smiled. "Maybe they are just waiting for someone else to say it first." Adrian laughed softly. He realized that Emily's confidence was not created by wanting to stand above others. It came from believing everyone deserved a chance to stand equally. As their friendship deepened, Adrian found himself looking forward to moments when Emily would challenge his thoughts. She brought a perspective that no advisor, no noble family, and no experienced leader had ever given him. But beyond curiosity, something else was beginning to grow. Respect. A respect built not on power or position, but on understanding. However, far away from the palace, old secrets connected to Frostvale Pack were beginning to surface. Hidden records, forgotten stories, and unanswered questions about Emily's past were waiting to be discovered. The Omega who had entered Blackthorn Kingdom without a title was about to learn that her story was connected to something much greater than she ever imagined. The discovery waiting beyond the walls of Blackthorn Kingdom began with a forgotten collection of records hidden deep within the royal archives. For generations, these documents had remained untouched, carrying stories that few people remembered and secrets that had slowly faded from history. When Adrian Blackwood learned that some of the records mentioned Frostvale Pack and a family connected to Emily Carter, he knew the information could change everything. He did not want to uncover the truth because Emily needed to prove herself. He wanted to understand because he knew she deserved to know her own story. Emily had spent most of her life accepting the identity others gave her. She had been called ordinary. She had been treated as someone without importance. But the more Adrian discovered, the more he realized that those beliefs had been built on incomplete information. When he finally asked Emily to join him in the archive room, she immediately noticed the seriousness in his expression. "There is something about your past that you should see," Adrian explained. Emily looked uncertain. She had never expected to find anything special connected to her family. For years, she believed her background was simple and unremarkable. As Adrian opened the old records, Emily saw names and stories that she had never heard before. Her family had once been respected among the werewolf communities for their wisdom and dedication to protecting unity between different packs. Over time, those stories had disappeared, replaced by assumptions that changed how people viewed her. Emily remained silent as she read the documents. She did not feel pride or anger. Instead, she felt something she had not experienced in a long time: understanding. She finally understood that the judgment she carried for years had never been the truth of who she was. "Why did nobody tell me?" she asked quietly. Adrian looked at the records before answering. Sometimes people repeat a story so many times that they forget to question whether it was ever true. Those words touched something deep inside Emily. She had always wondered if there was something missing about herself. Now she realized the missing piece was not within her. It was in the way others had chosen to see her. As the news slowly became known within the palace, opinions began changing. Some members of the royal court who had questioned Emily's place near Adrian started reconsidering their assumptions. They saw that she had never been seeking power. She had never used her connection with the Alpha King to gain influence. She simply continued being the same person she had always been. That was what made her different. Adrian admired how calmly Emily accepted the truth. Many people would have used such a discovery to demand recognition. Emily only wanted to move forward. "You could ask everyone who doubted you to apologize," Adrian told her one evening. Emily looked toward the kingdom lights below the castle. "An apology does not change the past, but maybe understanding can change the future." Adrian smiled because once again, she reminded him why she was different. Her strength was not found in proving others wrong. It was found in refusing to become bitter because others misunderstood her. However, the discovery created new questions. If Emily's past had been hidden, who had changed the story and why? What else remained unknown about the Omega everyone had underestimated? As Adrian continued searching for answers, he realized that Emily's journey was connected to a much larger truth. And the closer they came to uncovering it, the more the entire kingdom would have to rethink everything they believed about the Omega, who had once stood before the Alpha King and told him to listen. The truth hidden within Emily Carter's past began changing more than just the way people saw her. It began changing the way Blackthorn Kingdom understood strength itself. For years, many believed power came from status, reputation, and the ability to command others. But Emily had shown them something different. She had shown them that strength could also come from patience, compassion, and the courage to speak when others remained silent. Adrian Blackwood watched this change unfold with a feeling he had never expected. He had invited Emily into his world because he wanted to understand her story. But somewhere along the way, he realized she had also changed his own. The Alpha King, who once believed every decision had to come from authority, was beginning to see the importance of listening. As the days passed, Emily became more involved with the people of Blackthorn Kingdom. She visited villages outside the castle, spoke with families, and learned about challenges that were often invisible from the royal halls. She did not arrive with promises of instant solutions. She arrived with understanding. That alone made people feel respected. Adrian noticed that people trusted Emily not because of her connection to him, but because of the way she treated them. She never acted above anyone. She never reminded others of her importance. She simply showed up and cared. During a meeting with the royal advisors, Adrian invited Emily to share her thoughts about improving communication between the smaller packs and the royal court. Some advisors were surprised. They had expected the Alpha King to make decisions alone. They were not used to hearing an Omega's perspective during important discussions. Emily remained calm as she explained that many conflicts happen because leaders stopped listening before they understood. A kingdom is not only built by those who speak the loudest, she said. It is built by those willing to hear the quiet voices too. The room became silent. Adrian looked around and saw something changing. The same people who once questioned Emily were beginning to consider her words. They were starting to understand that her presence was not a challenge to their traditions. It was an opportunity to improve them. However, not everyone welcomed the changes. Some older members of the court still believed the old ways should remain untouched. They questioned why Adrian trusted Emily so deeply, and wondered if an Omega could truly influence the future of the kingdom. Adrian expected resistance, but this time he did not respond with authority alone. He responded with reason. A person's value is not determined by the expectations of others, he said. It is revealed through their actions. Those words reflected everything he had learned from Emily. Later that evening, Emily and Adrian walked through the quiet gardens behind the castle. The stars above Blackthorn Kingdom seemed brighter than usual, and for a moment, they could forget the responsibilities waiting for them. You know, you changed everything here, Adrian said. Emily smiled softly. I only reminded people of something they already knew deep down. Adrian looked at her and realized she was right. The kingdom was not changing because Emily had demanded it. It was changing because people finally allowed themselves to see what had always been there. But as the future began to look brighter, new questions remained unanswered. The hidden history of Emily's family had revealed only part of the truth. Somewhere beyond Blackthorn Kingdom, more secrets connected to her past were waiting. And when those secrets finally emerged, the Alpha King in the entire realm would discover that Emily Carter's story was far greater than anyone had ever imagined. The changes spreading through Blackthorn Kingdom reached far beyond the castle walls, but the truth about Emily Carter's past was still waiting to be fully revealed. Adrian Blackwood continued searching through the old records, hoping to understand why such an important part of Emily's history had been forgotten. The more he discovered, the more he realized that the story everyone believed was incomplete. Emily had never been an ordinary Omega. She had simply been someone whose true story had been overlooked for far too long. When Adrian finally found the remaining documents connected to Frostvale Pack, he discovered references to Emily's family that had disappeared from public records. They were not known because of wealth or influence. They were remembered because they had spent generations helping different packs find peace and cooperation. Their legacy was not built on power. It was built on trust. Adrian understood immediately why Emily carried herself differently. The kindness she showed was not something she learned recently. It was part of a tradition that had existed long before anyone judged her. When he shared the discovery with Emily, she listened quietly. She had expected to feel anger toward the people who hid the truth. Instead, she felt something unexpected. She felt sadness for all the years when people had believed a false story. I spent so long wondering what was wrong with me, Emily admitted. But maybe the question was never about me. Adrian looked at her with understanding. Sometimes people create a story because the truth requires them to change. Those words stayed with her. Emily realized that the rejection she experienced had shaped her, but it had never defined her. She had become strong not because others underestimated her, but because she refused to let their opinions decide who she would become. As the truth became known throughout Blackthorn Kingdom, the people began viewing Emily differently. But what surprised Adrian most was that Emily did not change after learning about her heritage. She remained exactly the same person. She still spent time with villagers. She still listened before speaking. She still treated everyone with the same respect. Her history explained where she came from, but her actions showed who she truly was. During a royal gathering, Adrian publicly recognized Emily's contributions to the kingdom. He did not introduce her because of her family background. He introduced her because of the difference she had already made. Some people believe greatness comes from where you are born, Adrian told the gathered leaders. But I have learned that greatness comes from what you choose to do. Emily stood beside him, feeling something she had rarely experienced before. Belonging. Not because she had gained a title, not because she had discovered a hidden legacy, but because people were finally seeing the person she had always been. However, the revelation about Emily's past also attracted attention from distant territories. Other leaders began asking questions about the forgotten history of Frostvale Pack, and why certain records had vanished. Adrian knew that the truth was larger than either of them expected. There were still unanswered questions, and some people would not be comfortable with old beliefs being challenged. That evening, Emily and Adrian stood together overlooking the kingdom. "Are you worried about what comes next?" Adrian asked. Emily thought for a moment before smiling. "I was afraid when I had nothing. Now I know I was never truly alone." Adrian looked at her and realized something important. The Omega who once walked into his kingdom without a title had become the person who reminded everyone what leadership was supposed to be. And as the next chapter of their journey approached, the Alpha King knew one thing with certainty. Emily Carter was not changing because the world finally recognized her. The world was changing because it finally understood her. The days following the revelation of Emily Carter's true history brought a new chapter for Blackthorn Kingdom. The kingdom was changing, but the greatest change was happening quietly within the hearts of the people. They were beginning to understand that leadership was not about standing above others. It was about standing with them. And no one understood that lesson more deeply than King Adrian Blackwood. Before Emily arrived, Adrian believed responsibility meant carrying every burden alone. He believed the role of an Alpha King required constant certainty, because any sign of doubt could make others question his ability to lead. But Emily had shown him another perspective. Strength was not hiding every weakness. Strength was having the courage to listen, to learn, and to grow. As the seasons passed, Emily became a familiar and respected presence throughout the kingdom. She continued visiting villages, speaking with families, and learning about the everyday experiences of the people. She never acted as if her new position made her better than anyone else. In fact, many people admired her because she remained exactly the same person she had always been. The Omega who once stood quietly at the edge of every room was now the person many looked toward for guidance. Adrian noticed that her influence came from something no title could create: trust. One afternoon, Adrian and Emily visited a small village near the Northern Valley. The people there welcomed them warmly, not because Adrian was the Alpha King, but because they knew Emily had taken the time to understand their lives. As they walked through the village, Adrian watched her speak with everyone around her. She remembered names, listened carefully, and offered encouragement without making promises she could not keep. "You know they follow you because they believe in you," Adrian said. Emily looked surprised. "I do not want people to follow me," she replied. "I want them to believe they can stand on their own." Her answer reminded Adrian why she was different. Many leaders wanted loyalty. Emily wanted empowerment. Later that evening, the royal court gathered to discuss the future of Blackthorn Kingdom. Some advisors suggested returning to older traditions, believing change had moved too quickly. Adrian listened before responding. He did not dismiss their concerns, but he also refused to ignore the lessons he had learned. "A tradition should protect the people it serves," he said, "not prevent them from being heard." Emily watched him carefully. She remembered the Alpha King she first met, the man everyone feared, the leader who seemed impossible to challenge. Now she saw someone who had changed because he was willing to see beyond himself. Their connection had never been built on power. It had been built on honesty. As the evening continued, Adrian and Emily walked through the palace gardens. The same place where they had once spoken as strangers now represented everything they had built together. "Do you ever miss the person you were before all of this?" Adrian asked. Emily smiled softly. "I do not miss feeling invisible, but I am grateful for the person that experience helped me become." Adrian understood. Emily's past had not made her weak. It had given her a deeper understanding of others who felt forgotten, and that understanding became one of the greatest strengths of the kingdom. However, even as Blackthorn Kingdom entered a more peaceful era, Adrian knew their journey was not completely finished. The forgotten records of Frostvale Pact had revealed only part of the truth. There were still mysteries surrounding Emily's family, and the reason her history had been hidden. But for the first time, neither of them feared what the future might bring, because they had already learned the most important lesson. The greatest discoveries are not always found in forgotten records or ancient stories. Sometimes they are found when one person finally chooses to truly see another. The story of Emily Carter and King Adrian Blackwood became a reminder throughout Blackthorn Kingdom that true change begins when someone chooses to see beyond appearances. Years after the first moment when an Omega's quiet courage challenged the Alpha King's pride, the kingdom was no longer the same place it had once been. The halls of the castle that were once filled with strict traditions now carried conversations about understanding, cooperation, and respect. Adrian often thought back to the day Emily first stood before him. At that time, everyone believed she was simply an Omega from a small pack who had spoken without thinking of the consequences. But Adrian knew the truth now. She had not acted without thought. She had acted with a belief that every voice mattered. Emily never became important because she stood beside the Alpha King. She became important because she reminded an entire kingdom of values they had forgotten. Her kindness, honesty, and courage inspired people far beyond Blackthorn Castle. The same individuals who once questioned her place now looked to her as an example of what leadership could become. She did not lead through commands. She led through compassion. Adrian also became a different kind of ruler. He remained the powerful Alpha King respected across the territories, but he no longer believed leadership meant having every answer alone. He created opportunities for more people to share their experiences and ensured that decisions reflected the voices of the entire kingdom. Emily's influence had not weakened his authority. It had strengthened it. One evening, years after their first unexpected conversation, Adrian and Emily returned to the garden where everything had begun to change. The same path where they once stood as strangers now represented the journey they had taken together. The moonlight covered the gardens, and the quiet of the night allowed them to reflect on everything that had happened. "Do you remember when everyone thought you were the most dangerous person in the room?" Emily asked with a gentle smile. Adrian laughed softly. "And you were the only person who did not believe it." Emily looked across the kingdom lights in the distance. "Maybe I just saw what everyone else refused to see." Adrian knew those words would always remain with him, because Emily had never tried to defeat him. She had never tried to take his place. She had simply reminded him that even the strongest person still needed someone willing to tell the truth. Their bond became a symbol throughout the werewolf territories. Not because an Alpha King chose an Omega, but because two people from different positions learned that respect was the foundation of everything meaningful. The Omega who was once overlooked became a voice of hope. The Alpha King who was once unreachable became a leader who understood the hearts of his people. Together, they proved that destiny was not about who held the most power. It was about who used their strength to create something better for others. And whenever new generations heard the story of Emily Carter and Adrian Blackwood, they remembered the lesson that changed Blackthorn Kingdom forever. A person's worth is never decided by the opinions of others. A quiet voice can change a kingdom. A gentle heart can inspire a ruler. And true strength will always be found in those who choose kindness when the world expects something else.